She was forced by her family to marry her sister's millionaire fiancé in Coma. Unbelievable happened. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into this shocking tale. It all started on a quiet afternoon, when Lily Thomas found herself sitting across from her parents, her heart racing. They were asking her to do the unimaginable, marry her sister's fiancé, a millionaire named Jason Hartman, who had been in a coma for the past 6 months. Lily was stunned, unsure of what to say. She had always known her family was controlling, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. Lily, your sister Rachel wouldn't want this. She wouldn't want Jason's wealth and family legacy to be lost, her mother insisted. Lily's hands trembled as she clutched her phone, her mind reeling. She had always been the responsible one in the family, the one who held everything together. But this was a step too far. Jason had been a successful tech entrepreneur, a self-made millionaire who had built an empire before a tragic accident had left him fighting for his life in a hospital bed. His family, the Hartmans, were among the wealthiest in the city, and their name carried a great deal of weight. But Jason hadn't been the only one affected by his coma. Rachel, Lily's older sister, had been his fiancée. She had been the one to stand by him when the accident occurred, but just months before, Rachel had tragically passed away from a sudden illness. The family was devastated, but they had quickly turned their attention to Lily, asking her to marry Jason in her sister's place. Lily could hardly believe her ears. "But I'm not Rachel," she whispered. "I can't just replace her." Her father, sitting across from her, his face grim, shook his head. "This isn't about replacing Rachel. It's about preserving the legacy. You owe it to this family." The weight of those words hung heavily in the air. She felt the pressure of her family's expectations, their desire for power and control, suffocating her. She wanted to scream, to run away, but she knew that wouldn't solve anything. The pressure continued to mount. Her mother was relentless. "Think of the money, the influence, the future. Jason's fortune and his company will be yours. You'll be able to give your children everything they could ever need. Isn't that worth it?" Lily couldn't believe what she was hearing. "And what about me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What about what I want?" Her mother's response was cold, as though she hadn't even heard the question. "What you want doesn't matter right now, Lily. This is bigger than you. This is about family, duty, and legacy." Lily felt her world spinning. She wasn't sure how much more of this she could take. How could she marry a man who didn't even know she existed? A man who was lying unconscious in a hospital bed, his future hanging by a thread? Yet, the more she thought about it, the more she realized she had no choice. Her family's power, their wealth, their demands, these things were impossible to ignore. She had been raised to do what was expected of her, to never question her family's authority. And now, it seemed like her fate had been sealed. The next few days passed in a blur of hospital visits and wedding planning. Lily had no say in any of it. Everything was arranged by her parents and the Hartman family. She would be married in a quiet ceremony at the hospital, with only close family members and a few select guests in attendance. She was to wear Rachel's wedding dress, the one that had been kept in a dusty box in the attic. It was as if her own identity, her own desires, didn't matter at all. Lily felt like a pawn in a game she never agreed to play. And as the day of the wedding drew nearer, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Her life, her choices, her freedom, all of it was slipping away. She was about to marry a man who didn't even know she existed, a man who might never wake up. Yet, somehow, the idea of this strange, forced union began to feel inevitable. What had she gotten herself into? I had no idea how much longer I could keep this up. Every day felt like I was living in someone else's shoes, playing a part in a life that was never mine. The hospital room was cold, the air stale with the smell of antiseptic, but it was still where I spent most of my time now. Every morning, I would arrive and sit beside Jason's bed, going through the motions of my new life. I would read to him, talk about trivial things, tell him about the weather, or even complain about the food at the hospital cafeteria. At first, it felt silly. I didn't even know if he could hear me. But after a while, it became routine. And it became the only part of the day that didn't feel completely empty. But I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that had settled deep inside me. I was doing all of this because my family had forced me to. I didn't know if Jason would ever wake up, but I knew I had no choice but to fulfill my duty. I had no say in the matter. And that was the hardest part. My thoughts were interrupted by the faint beep of the monitor, a soft but steady rhythm that had become strangely comforting over the past few weeks. I glanced at the screen, the numbers scrolling slowly. The heart rate was steady, but Jason was still in a deep coma. His face, though pale and lifeless, still had the same handsome features I had seen in the news stories about him. Jason Hartman, a self-made millionaire who had built a tech empire from the ground up. He had everything: money, power, the world at his feet, until a car accident had left him lying unconscious in this sterile hospital room. I didn't know much about him personally, but his family and mine had been friends for years. And now, because of a promise I never made, I was about to marry him. It was hard to ignore the weight of it all. "You need to do this, Lily. For the family," my father's voice echoed in my mind. It was the same mantra he had repeated to me over the last few weeks. And it was why I was here, sitting in this hospital room, instead of living my life the way I had once imagined. The life I had hoped for, the freedom to choose my own future. Those things were slipping away, piece by piece, as I continued to play the role they had cast me in. The door creaked open behind me, and I turned to see a nurse walking in, pushing a cart of supplies. "Good morning, Miss Thomas," she said with a polite smile. "How's he doing today?" I returned the smile, though I wasn't sure how to answer. "The same," I said quietly. The nurse nodded and began adjusting the foredrip and checking the various monitors. As she worked, I stood up and walked to the window, trying to find a distraction from the chaos of my thoughts. The sun was just beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the city skyline. I had always loved sunsets. They reminded me of peaceful moments, of times when I could be alone with my thoughts without feeling like I was being watched or judged. But today, even the beauty of the sunset couldn't quiet the storm inside me. I had heard nothing but bad news lately. My parents continued to pressure me to go through with this marriage, telling me it was my responsibility. My friends, though well-meaning, avoided talking to me about it, unsure of what to say. And Jason? Jason was still in a coma, his fate hanging in the balance. How could I marry a man who wasn't even awake? How could I live the rest of my life as his wife when he didn't even know I existed? I could feel my chest tightening as the questions swirled in my mind. Just as I was about to turn back to the bed, I heard the faintest noise, a soft, almost imperceptible sound. I froze, my heart racing. It was a small movement, a shift in the sheets, but it was enough to make me pause. My breath caught in my throat. I walked cautiously to the side of the bed, my eyes locked on Jason's hand. His fingers had twitched, just the slightest movement. Was it real? Or was it just a trick of my tired eyes? I stood there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity, waiting to see if it would happen again. And then it did. His fingers moved again, this time with more certainty. I felt a surge of hope flood through me. Could he really be waking up? Was this the moment I had been waiting for? My heart hammered in my chest as I gently took his hand, my fingers trembling against his cold skin. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the beeping monitor, steady and calm. And then, to my surprise, Jason's eyes fluttered open. His gaze was unfocused at first, as if he were seeing the world for the first time. But then, slowly, his eyes met mine. I could hardly breathe as I stared into those deep blue eyes. "Lily." His voice was hoarse, weak, but it was enough to send a chill down my spine. "Lily, is that you?" The sound of my name on his lips hit me like a wave, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something other than fear and uncertainty. But I couldn't help but wonder, what would he remember? What would he think of this strange situation he had woken up to? And more importantly, what would happen now? Jason's voice, though hoarse, was the sound I had been waiting for. His eyes, still slightly unfocused, met mine with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. I could hardly breathe, the weight of the moment settling on my chest. "Lily, is that really you?" he asked again, his voice strained but filled with recognition. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I had no idea how to answer him. The man I was supposed to marry, the man who was supposed to be my husband, had just woken up from a coma after months of lying unconscious. I barely knew him. Yet here I was, standing by his bed, holding his hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. My heart raced as I searched his eyes for any hint of recognition, any sign that he knew what had happened in the months he'd been out. But Jason's eyes remained distant, and I realized that the man I had been promised to was now a stranger in more ways than one. "You've been in a coma," I said softly, as though the words would somehow make sense of everything that had happened. You don't remember anything, do you?" Jason's brow furrowed slightly as he tried to piece together the fragments of his thoughts. "Coma?" He paused, then looked at me with a flicker of realization. "Rachel?" he asked, his voice faint. My stomach dropped at the mention of my sister's name. I had expected this, of course. Jason had been engaged to Rachel before the accident. But hearing him say her name, looking at me with confusion, made everything feel even more complicated. "No," I said quietly, squeezing his hand a little tighter. "Rachel, she passed away. It was a while ago. I'm Lily, your fiancé." The words felt foreign on my tongue. It was as though I was living in someone else's life, playing a role that didn't belong to me. His gaze shifted to mine, and I could see the confusion swirling in his eyes. He was trying to make sense of everything, but it wasn't adding up. "Fiancé," he whispered, his voice a mix of surprise and disbelief. "But I'm supposed to marry Rachel." The mention of my sister's name felt like a painful reminder of the life that had been stolen from me, from all of us. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, not sure what else to say. "I know this is complicated, but I'm here now. I'm the one who has been with you." Jason's eyes softened slightly as he processed my words. It was clear that he was struggling to remember the details, to understand what had happened, but I could see the hint of something in his gaze. Maybe it was relief, or maybe it was just a flicker of recognition. Either way, it made my heart ache. I had no idea what to do. Here I was, standing at the edge of a life that wasn't mine, caught between the promises my family had made and the reality of the man in front of me. Jason's hand twitched in mine again, and I could feel the warmth returning to his skin, the faint pulse of life I hadn't felt before. He was starting to come back to life, slowly, and I had no idea what that would mean for either of us. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. "You've been through a lot," I said softly. "But you're awake now. And I'm here. I'll help you through this, Jason." He nodded slowly, his eyes still clouded with confusion, but now with something else. Maybe hope, maybe a sense of trust. I wasn't sure, but for the first time since he had woken up, I felt like there was a possibility. For something real between us. I wasn't just here out of obligation anymore. This wasn't just a marriage of convenience, forced upon me by my family. This was a real moment, a real connection with a man I had barely known but was now bound to. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to believe that maybe things could work out. Maybe I could find happiness in this strange, forced marriage. But as the minutes stretched on, I could feel the weight of my family's expectations bearing down on me once again. I had made promises to them. They expected me to marry Jason, to take on Rachel's place in his life. They expected me to do what was right for the family, no matter the cost to myself. And I knew, deep down, that I had no choice. Jason was still recovering, still trying to find his footing in a world that had changed completely while he was unconscious. But what about me? What was I supposed to do in a world that had just turned upside down? I looked at Jason once more, his eyes now clearer, his grip on my hand stronger. For the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I wasn't completely alone in this. Maybe, just maybe, we could build something together. But as the door opened again and my parents walked into the room, their stern faces and eager eyes set on our future together, I knew that the real struggle was just beginning. As the days passed, Jason's recovery seemed to be progressing, but the truth was, neither of us knew what that would mean for the future. Every time I looked at him, I saw a man who was still learning to navigate the world again, trying to remember who he was and how his life had been before the accident. But there was something in his eyes, something different now, as though he was beginning to recognize me as more than just a stranger. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. The tension between us was undeniable. The more time I spent with him, the more I found myself questioning everything I had been told. Was this truly what I wanted? Was this really my fate, as my family insisted? Or was there something more to this situation than I realized? One afternoon, As I sat by his bedside, reading a book aloud to him, one of the many small routines I had come to rely on, Jason suddenly spoke up, his voice still weak, but clearer than before. Lily. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it was enough to make me pause. I stopped reading and turned to face him, my heart racing. Yes, I asked, not sure what to expect. His eyes searched mine, as if trying to find something, some hint of familiarity. Why did they ask you to do this? He asked. The question caught me off guard. I had been so focused on getting through each day that I hadn't really thought about why I was here, why I was being forced into a marriage with a man I barely knew. But now, as he asked, I realized how little I had truly thought about it. My answer caught in my throat, and I looked away, not sure how to explain. My family, they wanted me to marry you, I said slowly, the weight of those words sinking in. They said it was necessary, for the family, for the legacy. They said I had no choice. Jason didn't say anything for a long moment, as though processing my words. He looked away, his gaze fixed on the window, as if trying to make sense of the world outside. That's a lot of pressure, he murmured. And what about you? His question hung in the air, and I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. I had been trying so hard to please everyone, to do what I was supposed to do, that I hadn't even stopped to think about myself. I don't know, I said softly, my voice betraying the uncertainty that had settled deep inside me. I never asked for any of this. I didn't want to be in this situation. Jason's gaze softened as he looked back at me, his eyes filled with empathy. You're not alone in this, he said quietly. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm not going to let you go through this alone. His words made my chest tighten with emotion. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt like maybe things could be different. Maybe, just maybe, Jason wasn't the stranger I had imagined him to be. But that was a dangerous thought. I couldn't afford to let myself get too close to him. I couldn't forget why I was here. I couldn't forget that this marriage wasn't about love. It was about duty, about family expectations. And yet, with every passing day, it was becoming harder and harder to hold on to that belief. As the days turned into weeks, my feelings for Jason became more complicated. I watched him struggle to remember things, to piece together the life he had lost, and in those moments, I began to feel something I hadn't expected, compassion. A bond was forming between us, one that was impossible to ignore. But every time I felt myself getting closer to him, I reminded myself of the promises I had made to my family, the obligations I had taken on, and I pushed him away, emotionally and physically, as though trying to keep a distance that didn't exist. One evening, as I was leaving the hospital after another long day, I ran into my mother in the hallway. She looked at me with a stern expression, her eyes narrowing as she saw the exhaustion in my face. Lily, she said, her voice clipped. I'm glad to see you're still doing your duty. But don't forget why you're doing this. Jason is a part of our family now. He's your future. You need to stay focused on that. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I nodded, trying to hide the anger that bubbled up inside me. But my mind was already racing. Jason wasn't just my future because of some arrangement. He was more than that. He was a person, struggling with his own demons, trying to find his way back to a life that had been taken from him. And I couldn't deny the pull I felt toward him. The next day, I found myself sitting beside him again, this time in silence. He had been resting most of the day, but now, as the evening light filtered through the window, he was awake, his eyes alert. Lily, he said again, his voice stronger now, though still uncertain. I don't want to be a burden on you. I don't want to put you in a position where you have to make sacrifices for me. I know this marriage isn't what you wanted. My heart swelled with emotion as I listened to him. This wasn't the man I had expected to wake up from his coma. He wasn't just the wealthy, successful businessman everyone had made him out to be. He was vulnerable, afraid, and struggling just as much as I was. You're not a burden, I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. I'm here because I want to be. For a moment, there was silence between us, and I realized that the truth had finally come to the surface. The question wasn't whether I had a choice anymore. It was whether I could face the consequences of following my heart. But before I could say anything else, the door to the room opened, and my father walked in, his eyes cold and calculating as always. Lily, he said sharply, we need to talk. Your obligations aren't over. You've made your bed, now it's time to lie in it. My heart sank as I turned to look at Jason, who was watching the scene unfold with confusion in his eyes. The weight of the future was starting to settle in, and I realized that this was just the beginning of a much bigger battle than I had ever imagined. The tension in the room was palpable. My father's cold gaze met mine, and I felt a chill run down my spine. He didn't need to say anything more. His presence alone was enough to remind me of my duty, of the responsibility I had taken on, and of the life I was expected to live. "Lily," he repeated, his voice sharp and commanding. "It's time for you to stop playing games. Your commitment to this family has to come first." I could feel my chest tighten as I held his stare. How many times had I heard those words growing up? How many times had my father reminded me that family came before everything else? He had always been the one to dictate my path, from the small decisions to the biggest ones. This was no different. "I know what's expected of me," I said, my voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside me. "But you don't understand. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this marriage." My father's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "It's not about what you want, Lily. It's about what's best for the family. Your mother and I have sacrificed enough. Now it's your turn." His words felt like a slap across my face. He didn't care about my feelings. He never had. Everything he did, everything he said, was about maintaining control, preserving the family's name and legacy. I glanced at Jason, who was still sitting in the bed, his eyes wide with confusion. He had been through so much. Yet here I was, stuck in a situation that wasn't even of my making. How could I marry him when I wasn't even sure I knew him? How could I commit to a life that had been planned for me by people who didn't even care what I truly wanted? Jason's gaze met mine, and I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. He had woken up to a reality that was so far removed from the life he had once known. I could only imagine what it must have felt like for him to be told that he was going to marry someone he didn't even recognize, someone who had only been forced into this position out of family obligation. The weight of it all was overwhelming. My father's voice broke through my thoughts, sharp and insistent. "You need to marry him, Lily. The sooner this is over, the better. You'll take over the Hartman legacy, and everything will fall into place." The words felt like a knife in my gut. "What about what I want?" I finally asked, my voice cracking. "Does that even matter to you?" My father's expression faltered for a brief moment, as though he had not expected me to challenge him. "It's not about you, Lily. It's about what's best for all of us. You don't understand the bigger picture." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that I was more than just a pawn in their game, that I had feelings, desires, dreams of my own. But I knew it would be futile. I had spent my entire life conforming to their expectations, doing what was required of me, and now it was no different. As I stood there, torn between duty and desire, I realized just how trapped I was. Jason, who had been silently observing the exchange, spoke up quietly. "Lily," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "You don't have to do this." The words hit me harder than I expected. His voice, filled with genuine concern, cut through the tension in the room. I looked at him, searching his eyes for something, anything, that might give me the courage to break free from the life that had been forced upon me. "You don't have to marry me because of some family obligation," he continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I don't want that for you. You deserve better." I could feel my heart swelling in my chest as his words settled into my soul. For the first time, someone was looking at me with care, with compassion, not out of duty or expectation. Jason's honesty, his understanding, felt like a lifeline in the midst of the chaos. But I knew the reality of the situation. I couldn't just walk away. My family's expectations weighed too heavily on me. I had a role to play, a part to fill, and nothing, not even Jason's kindness, could change that. "I don't have a choice," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I have to do this. For my family." Jason looked at me with a mixture of sadness and understanding. He seemed to sense the helplessness in my voice, the resignation that had crept into my words. "I know," he said softly, "but I want you to know that I won't hold you to this if you don't want to. I'll support you, whatever you decide." His words, though kind, only made things more difficult. Because deep down, I knew that I couldn't escape the truth. My family's demands were non-negotiable. I had to marry him, whether I wanted to or not. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. My father left, and the tension between Jason and me lingered in the air. We didn't speak much after that. What was there to say? We were both caught in a situation we hadn't chosen, forced to play roles that didn't fit who we were. But as I left the room that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jason's words had planted a seed of doubt in my mind. What if I didn't have to do this? What if there was another way out? Could I still escape this path, or had I already gone too far? The days that followed were filled with the same hollow routine. I would visit Jason every day, talk to him as if everything was normal, but the truth was far from it. My father's words echoed in my mind, growing louder with each passing hour. You have no choice, Lily. It's for the family. I had been raised to obey, to never question, but now the weight of that expectation seemed unbearable. Jason was getting better, physically at least, but emotionally, he was still a stranger. He had no memory of who he was, of the life he had before the accident, and worst of all, he had no idea of the life that was being thrust upon him. And here I was, trapped in this web of family obligations, trying to make the best of a situation that seemed to grow worse with every passing day. I sat by his bedside one afternoon, watching him as he rested. His eyes were closed, but his breathing was steady. I couldn't help but notice how peaceful he looked when he was sleeping, as if the chaos of our lives hadn't reached him yet. But I knew that would change soon. He couldn't stay in this coma forever. He would wake up, and when he did, I would have to marry him. It was a reality I couldn't escape. I knew it. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance to change everything. Lily. Jason's voice startled me from my thoughts. I looked up, meeting his eyes, which were clearer than before. He was awake now, fully awake, and the confusion that had once clouded his gaze was beginning to clear. How are you feeling? I asked, my voice gentle. He gave a faint smile. Better, he said, his voice hoarse but stronger than before. I still don't remember much, but I feel different. The words hung in the air between us. Different. Was that what he felt? Different from the man he had been before? Different from the man who had been engaged to my sister? I tried to keep my expression neutral, but inside, I was struggling to maintain control. I couldn't let myself feel anything for him. This wasn't a love story. It was a duty, a responsibility. You've been through a lot, I said, trying to keep the conversation light. But you're here now, and that's all that matters. Jason seemed to sense the hesitation in my voice. His eyes searched mine, trying to understand what I wasn't saying. Lily, he said quietly, what's really going on here? Why are you here? Why are you marrying me? The question was unexpected, but it was the one I had been avoiding. I had always known this moment would come, the moment when Jason would wake up and question everything. I had no choice but to answer him, even though it felt like my heart was being torn in two. My family wants this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They made me promise to marry you. Jason's expression darkened, and for the first time since I had known him, I saw a flicker of anger in his eyes. Made you promise? He repeated, his voice tight. Lily, you don't have to do this. You don't owe them anything. You don't owe me anything. His words cut through the tension in the room, and I felt the walls I had carefully built around myself begin to crumble. He was right. I didn't owe anyone anything. Not my father, not my family, not even Jason. And yet, here I was, bound by promises and expectations I had never asked for. But I don't have a choice, I whispered, the words coming out before I could stop them. I have to do this. My family, they're depending on me. Jason reached out, taking my hand gently in his. No, you don't. You can choose, Lily. You can choose what's best for you. His touch sent a jolt of electricity through me, and for the first time, I felt like I was seeing him, not as the man I had been told to marry, but as someone who truly cared about me. Someone who saw me as more than just an obligation. But could I really choose what was best for me? Could I walk away from everything I had known, everything I had been raised to believe? My mind was spinning, and I could feel my heart racing in my chest. But what about you? I asked, my voice trembling. What happens to you if I don't marry you? What will happen to us? Jason looked at me with a soft, sad smile. I don't know, he said. But I know one thing for sure. I don't want you to be trapped in a life you didn't choose. You deserve better than this. His words hit me like a ton of bricks, and I felt a tear slip down my cheek before I could stop it. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when everything could change. But could I really go through with it? Could I truly leave everything behind for a chance at something I wasn't even sure I deserved? The door to the room opened suddenly, and my father walked in, his face as stern as ever. He didn't look at Jason, but his gaze settled on me, cold and calculating. Lily, he said sharply. We need to talk. This has gone on long enough. I stood up quickly, wiping away my tears, trying to pull myself together. Jason watched me silently, and I could see the concern in his eyes, but I couldn't let myself be weak. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. I'll be back, I said to him, forcing a smile. Stay here. I'll be right back. But as I followed my father out of the room, I knew that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The beginning of a choice I had never thought I would have to make. The beginning of a battle that would determine my future and the future of the man who had been forced into my life. I couldn't walk away from it. Not now. Not yet. I walked out of the room, following my father's stern figure down the long, sterile hallway. The weight of what was happening, the pressure, seemed to crush me with every step. As we reached the conference room, my heart pounded in my chest, my mind racing. My father's footsteps echoed, and I could hear the faint beeping of the monitors from the hallway, as if they were part of the background to a life I didn't recognize anymore. Sit down, my father commanded as he motioned to the chair across from him. He didn't need to say more. I knew the drill. He was about to remind me of my duties. As I sat down, I tried to steady my breath, forcing myself to look calm, even though I felt anything but. My father wasted no time getting to the point. This needs to happen, Lily, he said, his voice low but unwavering. I don't care what feelings you've gotten for him in these past few weeks. This marriage is about securing the family's future. You don't get to back out now. I felt my chest tighten. The words were so cold, so calculating. I don't want this, I said quietly, my voice trembling slightly. My father raised an eyebrow, his gaze hardening. What's more important, Lily? Your selfish desires, or the legacy we've built? This isn't just about you. It's about the whole family, the name, the empire we've worked for. I closed my eyes, trying to find the right words. But no matter how much I tried, I couldn't escape the reality he had imposed on me. What about Jason? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What about what he wants? My father leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Jason's not in a position to decide what he wants right now. He's not the one in control. The words stung more than I expected. How could he be so heartless? You're wrong. I snapped, suddenly feeling a surge of anger. Jason is a person, not some tool for your business deals. He deserves more than this. My father didn't flinch. Do you think he cares what you want? Do you think he'll be the one standing with you when this is all over? No. He'll be grateful that we saved him from his own mess. He's lucky you're here, Lily. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. I wanted to scream, to tell him that I wasn't just some pawn in his game. But I knew it was pointless. The choices were made for me long ago. What happens if I refuse? I asked, my voice steadier now. You think you can just walk away from this? From us? My father's eyes narrowed. If you refuse, Lily, you'll be disowned. We'll wash our hands of you, and you'll never see another penny of this family's money. You'll be nothing. The finality in his words hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't bluffing. If I defied him, I would lose everything. The security, the comfort, the life I had always known. My heart sank. I knew what I had to do, but every part of me resented it. I wasn't a person anymore. I was just an object in his game. I understand, I said quietly, though every word felt like a betrayal. My father gave me a satisfied look. Good. Now go back to him. Get things settled. We'll announce the wedding soon. Make sure this goes smoothly. I nodded stiffly, standing up from the chair. As I turned to leave, my father's voice stopped me. Remember, Lily, he called after me. You're doing this for your future. And for the families. His words followed me as I walked back to Jason's room. Each step felt like I was walking toward a life I didn't want. When I reached the door to his room, I hesitated for a moment, breathing in deeply before opening it. Jason was sitting up now, looking out the window, his face thoughtful. When he heard me enter, he turned, and his eyes met mine. There was a softness there, a kindness that I hadn't seen before. Lily, he said, his voice hesitant but warm. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about not going through with this. I could feel the weight of his words pressing down on me. He was giving me an out, a chance to escape, but I knew it wasn't that simple. I had made a promise. And now, more than ever, it felt like a prison I couldn't escape. I forced a smile, though it didn't reach my eyes. It's fine, Jason. This is what I have to do. It's just family. I saw the confusion in his eyes, but he didn't press. He knew something was off, but he wasn't asking the questions I didn't want to answer. Lily, he said after a pause. You don't have to pretend with me. If you don't want this, I'll understand. You don't have to stay because of some promise. I shook my head, my throat tight. It's not that simple. I can't just walk away. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded, his gaze softening. I wish you didn't have to do this, he said quietly. But if this is what you want, I'll stand by you. His words were both a comfort and a burden. I knew he meant well, but I couldn't let him sacrifice himself for me. This was my battle to fight. As I stood there, looking at him, I realized something I hadn't before. Jason wasn't the one holding me back. It was my own family. And that was the hardest truth of all. I couldn't leave. I couldn't run. My family would never let me go. I'll marry you, Jason, I said softly. But I need you to understand, this is not what I wanted. The look in his eyes was filled with sadness, but he said nothing. I knew that despite everything, despite the pressure, despite the weight of the life I had been forced into, there was still a part of me that hoped for something more, something real. But as I turned to leave his room, I knew that whatever happened next, I would have to face the consequences of my choice. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that. Not yet. I walked out of Jason's room with the weight of my decision pressing down on my chest. The door clicked softly behind me, and I felt the sudden emptiness of the hallway stretch out before me, the sound of my footsteps the only thing breaking the silence. I had just agreed to marry a man I barely knew, a man who had woken up from a coma only to find himself trapped in a life that wasn't his. My family's expectations, my father's demands, they all felt like invisible chains tightening around my wrists. Every part of me wanted to escape, to run away from this life I had been thrust into, but I knew it was too late for that. There was no turning back. As I walked back to my own room, I could feel the weight of the choices I had made. Jason had given me an out, had offered me the chance to walk away, to follow my own path, but I couldn't take it. Not with everything at stake. I had promised my family. I had promised them that I would do what was necessary to secure our future, and now, I had no choice but to follow through. When I entered my room, I found my mother waiting for me, sitting in the chair by the window, looking out at the city below. She didn't turn to acknowledge me, but I could feel her gaze, sharp and calculating, as though she was waiting for me to say something. You've made your decision then, she said, her voice cool and composed, as if nothing had changed. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I walked over to the window, looking out at the city, trying to find some sort of solace in the view. The lights below were flickering, the world moving on as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't just made the most difficult decision of my life. Yes, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm going through with it. My mother's lips curled into a small smile, but there was no warmth behind it. Good, she said, her tone almost approving. It's the right thing to do, Lily. You'll see. This will be for the best. You'll be happy once this is all behind you. I wanted to scream, to tell her that nothing about this felt right, that I wasn't happy, and that I couldn't just do what she wanted without considering how it affected me. But I kept quiet, afraid that if I said too much, the anger I felt would explode, and I wouldn't be able to stop it. Jason doesn't deserve this, I said, barely able to stop the words from tumbling out. He doesn't deserve a marriage that's forced on him. My mother's expression hardened, and she stood up from the chair, walking over to me. Don't forget, Lily, she said, her voice low and stern. This is about more than what Jason deserves. This is about family. This is about doing what's right. You have a duty. I clenched my fists at my sides, fighting the tears that threatened to spill over. And what about me? I asked, my voice breaking. What about what I deserve? My mother's eyes softened for a brief moment, but then she turned away, as if she couldn't bear to look at me. What you deserve, she said, her voice now tinged with impatience, is a future that is secure, Lily. This is what you need. This is what we need. The rest will follow. Her words stung more than I had expected. I knew what she was saying. This was all for my own good, for the good of our family, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. I had spent my whole life doing what was expected of me, always following the rules, always living in the shadow of my family's demands. But now, as I stood here, looking at the life I had agreed to live, I couldn't help but wonder if there was a way out. Was this really all I had to look forward to? Was this what my future held? Living a life dictated by my family, a life where I had no say, no choice? You'll be fine, Lily, my mother continued, as if reading my mind. Once this is over, you'll see that it was worth it. You'll be part of something bigger than yourself. The words felt hollow, empty, as if they were meant to pacify me, to make me feel better about the choice I had made. But I didn't feel better. I felt trapped. I have to go, I said, my voice cold, barely able to keep the emotions from flooding out. I need to see Jason. My mother didn't stop me. She didn't try to say anything more. She just watched as I walked out of the room, her expression unreadable. I left the house, heading back to the hospital. The city outside was buzzing with life, but everything felt muted to me. The weight of my decision was bearing down on me, and I didn't know if I could carry it any longer. I arrived at the hospital, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stepped into Jason's room, I saw him sitting up in bed, his eyes fixed on the door. When he saw me, he gave me a small, hopeful smile, but it quickly faded as he noticed the look on my face. "Lily," he said, his voice gentle. "Are you okay?" I nodded, though the truth was that I didn't know if I was okay anymore. "I'm fine," I said, though the words felt like a lie. I just wanted to talk to you." Jason's gaze softened as he looked at me, his eyes full of concern. "I'm glad you came," he said, his voice low. "We need to talk too." I took a deep breath, walking over to his bedside, trying to steady my nerves. The moment of truth had arrived. The moment when everything I had been avoiding, everything I had been running from, would finally come to light. "I've made my decision, Jason," I said quietly. "I'm going through with it. I'm going to marry you." Jason looked at me for a long moment, as if trying to process what I had just said. And then, to my surprise, he smiled. It wasn't the smile I had expected, but it was a smile nonetheless. "Then we'll make the best of it," he said, his voice filled with a quiet strength. Together, I sat beside Jason in his hospital room, the weight of my decision settling heavily. Between us, it had been a long day, filled with conversation, questions, and uncertainties. But now, in the quiet of the evening, it felt like everything was shifting, like something inside me was changing. The truth was, I didn't know what I was doing anymore. I had promised to marry him, but was it for the right reasons? My family's pressure, their expectations, was that enough to base a lifetime of decisions on? And then there was Jason. He had been through so much, and yet, through all of it, he seemed to be taking things in stride. He was recovering, both physically and emotionally, though the past few days had shown me how much he was still struggling with his memory. His life had been turned upside down, just like mine, and yet here we were, facing this strange reality together. "Lily, I know you're not happy about this," Jason said, his voice low but steady, drawing me out of my thoughts. I looked at him, surprised by his words. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice soft. Jason's gaze was fixed on me, his expression a mixture of concern and understanding. "I've seen it in your eyes. You're carrying something heavy, and I get it. This marriage, all of it, it's not what you want." His words hit me like a wave. For the first time, someone saw me. Someone understood the conflict inside me, the battle I was fighting between doing what was right for my family and what I truly wanted for myself. "I have to do this," I whispered, the words coming out before I could stop them. "It's what's expected of me. I don't have a choice." Jason reached out and gently took my hand, his grip warm against my skin. "Lily," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you always have a choice. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise." The sincerity in his voice made my heart ache. I had been told my whole life that my family's legacy was more important than anything else, that my duty came first, that I had to sacrifice my own desires for the greater good. But sitting here with Jason, I realized something. Maybe I didn't have to follow this path. Maybe there was a way out. But what would that mean for me? For Jason? For everything I had known? The door to the room opened suddenly, and my father stepped in, his presence as commanding as ever. "Lily," he said, his tone cold and firm, "it's time. We need to finalize everything. The wedding arrangements, the announcement, it all has to happen now." The tension in the room thickened as I stood up, my hand still in Jason's. I looked at my father, trying to steady my nerves. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine, that I was okay with the path they had chosen for me. "I'm not ready," I said quietly, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to stay calm. My father's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening as if he didn't understand what I meant. "Lily, this is not up for discussion," he said, his voice hardening. "This is what we've all agreed upon. You've made your decision. Now you need to live with it. His words were like a slap to my face. I had made my decision, yes, but was it really my decision? Or was it a choice forced upon me by circumstances I couldn't control? Jason, still sitting in bed, spoke up. His voice, calm yet firm, cut through the tension. Mr. Thomas, I understand the pressure you're under, Jason said, looking directly at my father. But Lily deserves to make her own choices. This isn't just about family legacy. It's about her life, her happiness. My father turned sharply toward Jason, his face hardening. Stay out of this, Hartman, he said coldly. This is none of your concern. Lily has a duty, and she will fulfill it. That's the end of it. Jason's expression didn't falter. You're wrong, he said quietly, but with undeniable strength. It is my concern. It's about what's best for her. And if you truly cared about her happiness, you'd stop pushing her into something she doesn't want. I stood there, frozen, torn between two worlds. Jason was right, but the fear of defying my father, of losing everything I had ever known, gripped me tightly. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everything my family had worked for, everything they expected me to uphold. My father's eyes flashed with anger, but before he could speak again, Jason interrupted. Lily and I have both been through a lot, he said, his voice steady and calm. And we're both trying to figure out what's best for us. But this marriage, as it's being forced upon us, isn't the solution. We need to figure this out together, without the pressure. My father stood motionless, staring at Jason, then at me. There was a long pause, an almost suffocating silence. Finally, he spoke, his voice filled with disdain. You think I'm going to let you ruin everything? He said, his words dripping with bitterness. You think I'm going to let you both walk away from this? You have no idea what's at stake. I felt a sudden surge of determination. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was trapped. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep living this way. I'm not ruining anything, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. But I am going to make my own choices. I will marry Jason, but only if it's on my terms. My father's face turned red with fury. You will regret this, Lily. He spat, his voice low and threatening. You'll regret defying me. I'll make sure of it. I didn't flinch. I wasn't sure what my father would do, but I knew I couldn't let fear control me any longer. I don't care, I said firmly. I have to live my life, not yours. With that, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving my father behind. The path ahead was unclear, but for the first time, I felt like I had a choice. A real choice. And with that, I knew I could face whatever came next. I stepped out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. I had never felt so sure and yet so uncertain in my entire life. My father's words still echoed in my mind, his anger and threats weighing heavily on me. But something inside me had snapped. I was done being controlled. I had spent my whole life living according to other people's expectations, and I couldn't do it anymore. Not now. Not with everything that had happened. I had just made the most important decision of my life. But now, as I stood there in the hallway, I couldn't help but wonder if I had made the right choice. The door to Jason's room was still closed, and I could hear the faint hum of the hospital around me, but it felt like everything had stopped. For a moment, I just stood there, trying to gather my thoughts. Was I really ready for this? Was I really ready to take control of my own life, no matter the consequences? I had already made my decision. I had chosen to marry Jason, but it wasn't just because my family had demanded it. It was because, for the first time, I wanted to make my own choice. I had told my father that I was marrying Jason, but it wasn't for him or anyone else. It was for me. I walked down the hallway, my footsteps echoing in the empty space, and reached Jason's room. I paused for a moment before knocking gently on the door. I didn't know what I was walking into. The tension in the air was palpable, and I could feel my heart racing again. But when I opened the door and saw Jason sitting there, his eyes focused on the door, something inside me calmed. Lily, he said quietly, his voice warm, almost relieved. I stepped into the room, closing the door softly behind me. How are you feeling? I asked, my voice gentle. Jason gave me a tired smile, his eyes bright despite everything. Better, he said, though there was a hint of exhaustion in his voice. I've been thinking, and I just want to make sure this is what you really want. I swallowed hard, my heart sinking slightly. He was giving me another chance, another moment to back out, but I couldn't. I had already made my choice. It is, I said, though my voice wavered. I'm doing this because it's my choice now, Jason. I'm not doing this for anyone else. I'm not doing this because I have to. Jason's eyes softened, and he nodded slowly. I understand, he said quietly. But just know that whatever happens next, I'm here for you. You don't have to face this alone. His words meant more to me than I could say. It was the first time in a long time that someone had truly understood me, had offered me support without strings attached. I wasn't alone. And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. But as I sat beside him, the reality of the situation began to set in. I had made a choice, but that didn't mean there wouldn't be consequences. I was still bound by my family's expectations, still trapped in a life that had been planned out for me long before I had a say. And now, as I sat here with Jason, I couldn't ignore the fact that my father had already made it clear that if I didn't marry Jason, I would lose everything. But did that matter anymore? I wasn't sure. I've been thinking too, Jason said, breaking the silence. I know this isn't how we both imagined things would be. But I'm not asking you to do this because you have to. I want you to know that, Lily. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together. His words hit me hard, like a wave crashing over me. He wasn't asking for a forced marriage either. He wasn't asking me to stay in this because of some obligation. He wanted to be with me, but he also understood that I had to want it for myself. That was something I hadn't expected to hear. It made me feel like maybe, just maybe, we could make this work. We could build something real. I wasn't sure what that would look like, but I knew that for the first time, it felt like a possibility. I looked at him, my heart swelling with emotions I couldn't quite explain. This wasn't just about me being forced into a role anymore. It was about two people, both lost in their own ways, trying to find something real amid the chaos. Thank you, I whispered, my voice cracking with emotion. Thank you for giving me that chance. Jason smiled at me, a soft, genuine smile that made my heart skip a beat. You don't have to thank me, Lily. This is your life, and I'm not going to make it harder for you. Whatever we decide, we do it together. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of relief. For the first time in so long, I felt like I wasn't carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I wasn't alone. I wasn't trapped in a life that wasn't mine. I had made my choice. And now, with Jason by my side, I had to live with it. The door opened suddenly, and my father stepped in, his face as cold and stern as ever. Lily, he said sharply, his eyes cold. It's time to finalize everything. You've made your decision. Now, we move forward. His words hit me like a jolt of electricity, snapping me back into the reality I had been trying to escape. I had made my decision, yes, but I knew that the road ahead would not be easy. The pressure from my father, from my family, would never stop. But for the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I had Jason, and maybe that was all I needed to face whatever came next. I stood there, frozen, as my father's cold gaze locked onto mine. He didn't need to say anything more. His eyes, sharp and unwavering, told me everything I needed to know. I had made my choice, but I could feel the weight of his expectations bearing down on me. I had tried to escape it, tried to imagine a future where I was free, where I made my own decisions. But it felt like no matter how hard I fought, I was still tethered to the life my family had carved out for me. My father's presence filled the room, overwhelming everything in its path. Lily, he said, his voice low but firm, it's time to finalize everything. The wedding is set. The family is counting on you. I had heard those words so many times before, but now they felt different, hollow, almost suffocating. The room felt too small, too stifling, and I realized that no matter how much I had hoped things would change, nothing had shifted. My father still held the reins of my life, and I was still expected to play the role he had assigned me. But this time, something inside me refused to comply. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I've already made my decision, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside me. I'll go through with the marriage, but on my terms. Not yours. Not anyone else's. It's my life, and I won't let it be dictated anymore. The words felt strange, foreign even, but they were the truth. I had spent so long living for others, trying to please my family, trying to fulfill their expectations. But now, I had to live for myself. I could see the shock in my father's eyes, and for a moment, he seemed at a loss for words. You're choosing him over us? He asked, his voice tight with disbelief. Over the legacy we've built. Over everything we've worked for. His words felt like a punch to the gut, but I stood my ground. No, I'm not choosing Jason over you. I'm choosing myself, I replied, my voice unwavering. My father stared at me for a long moment, his face a mask of frustration and anger. You're making a mistake, Lily, he finally said, his tone colder than ever. You'll regret this. You'll regret defying us. I'm giving you a chance to do what's right. Don't throw it away. His words hung in the air, thick with the weight of his power. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to apologize, didn't feel the need to bend to his will. Maybe I will regret it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But at least I'll regret it on my own terms. I turned away from him, my heart racing as I walked toward the door. I didn't need to hear any more. The choice had been made, and I was ready to face whatever came next. As I stepped out of the room, I could feel the weight of my father's gaze on my back, but I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I had already made my decision. I walked back to Jason's room, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. It was strange, this sense of freedom mixed with fear, excitement mixed with doubt. But as I entered Jason's room, I felt a strange calm wash over me. He was sitting up in bed, his eyes locked on mine as I walked in. The warmth in his gaze made my heart ache. He had no idea what had just transpired, but somehow, I knew that he was the one person who would understand. Lily, Jason said, his voice soft, as if he could sense the storm inside me. Are you okay? I nodded, my throat tight. I had never felt more uncertain in my life. But for some reason, standing here with him felt like the only place I could truly be. I'm fine, I said, though the words didn't feel entirely true. I paused, trying to find the right words. I'm just trying to figure out what happens next. Jason gave me a small, understanding smile. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together, he said, his voice steady. You don't have to do this alone. His words meant more to me than I could express. It wasn't just about the marriage anymore. It wasn't just about fulfilling my family's expectations or playing my part in their world. It was about me, about what I wanted for myself. And in that moment, I realized something important. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Thank you. I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Thank you for understanding. Jason's smile softened, and he reached for my hand, his grip warm and reassuring. You don't have to thank me. I just want what's best for you, Lily. And for the first time, I truly believed him. I could feel the path ahead of me, uncertain as it was, but for the first time, it felt like my path. I wasn't walking it because I was being forced to. I wasn't walking it because I was trying to live up to anyone's expectations. I was walking it because it was my choice. But as I stood there, holding Jason's hand, I knew that the journey ahead would be anything but easy. The challenges, the pressures from my family, the weight of the expectations, it would all be there, looming in the background. But for the first time, I was ready to face it. With Jason by my side, I could do this. I could build a life that was truly mine. Whatever came next, I would face it head on, without regret. The door to the room opened, and I turned to see my father standing there, his expression unreadable. I knew what he wanted, but for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. Lily, he said, his voice clipped. It's time to move forward. I looked at him, my heart steady for the first time in years. I'm ready, I said. And for the first time in my life, I truly meant it. I sat quietly beside Jason, the weight of everything finally starting to sink in. My father had left the room, but I could still feel his presence hanging in the air, as if his expectations were still pushing against me, urging me to follow through with the marriage for the sake of family and legacy. But Jason's words echoed in my mind, reminding me that I didn't have to live for anyone else. I could make my own choices, choose my own path. For the first time, I was starting to believe it. Jason was looking at me, his gaze soft but steady, as though he understood the turmoil I was feeling. I hadn't realized just how much I had been holding in until now. I had spent so much of my life trying to please everyone, trying to live up to my family's expectations, that I had forgotten what it felt like to think for myself. Lily, Jason said, his voice breaking the silence. Are you sure about this? You don't have to do anything you don't want to. This marriage, it's not just about us. It's about you too. I can't be part of something that makes you miserable. His words hit me harder than I expected, and I felt a lump form in my throat. I don't know, I whispered. I've always been told what to do. I've always followed orders. My family, they've made it clear that this marriage is what's best for them. But what about me? Jason reached over and took my hand gently in his. Lily, you matter, he said softly. You have to decide what's best for you. No one else can make that decision for you. Not me. Not your father. Only you can know what will make you happy. I looked down at our hands, the warmth of his touch a comfort amidst the chaos swirling in my mind. I had spent so long ignoring my own desires, pushing them aside to fulfill my family's wishes. But now, as Jason held my hand, I realized that I had the power to take control of my life. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was mine to live. I took a deep breath, letting it out slowly as I looked back up at him. I want to be happy, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. But I don't know if it's possible. I've been told my whole life what I should do, what's expected of me. And now, I'm scared of what will happen if I walk away from that. My father, he won't let me go so easily. He'll make sure I stay on the path he's chosen for me. Jason's eyes softened with understanding. I know it's hard, he said quietly. But you don't have to do this alone. You have me. I'll stand by you, whatever you choose. You don't have to let your family dictate your future. You deserve more than that. His words were a balm to my soul, a lifeline that I didn't realize I needed until now. The truth was, I had been so focused on what my family wanted that I had forgotten to ask myself what I truly needed. What if I make the wrong choice? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What if I end up regretting it? Jason shook his head. There's no such thing as the perfect choice, Lily. There are only the choices we make. And whatever happens, we'll figure it out together. I promise. I felt tears well up in my eyes, but this time, they were tears of relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't fighting alone. I wasn't being forced into something I didn't want. I had someone by my side, someone who cared about me for who I was, not because of what my family wanted me to be. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice trembling. I don't know if I'm strong enough to fight this. I don't know if I can stand up to my father. He's always had control over my life. How do I break free from that? Jason's expression softened, and he squeezed my hand gently. You're stronger than you think, Lily, he said. And you don't have to do it all at once. Take it one step at a time. I'll be here every step of the way. His reassurance gave me the courage to look at the situation differently. I didn't have to have all the answers right now. I didn't have to know exactly what would happen next. I just had to take the first step. And for the first time, I felt like I could. I stood up, taking a deep breath as I glanced at Jason one more time. I need to talk to my father, I said, my voice steady, despite the nerves bubbling up inside me. I need to tell him that I won't live my life according to his rules anymore. I won't be forced into a marriage for the sake of the family name. Jason smiled, his eyes full of pride. You've got this, he said. I'm proud of you, Lily. No matter what happens, I'm proud of you. With a final glance at Jason, I walked out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew this wouldn't be easy. I knew my father wouldn't let go of his grip on me without a fight. But I couldn't keep living in fear. I had to face my future head on, and that meant standing up for myself, even if it meant defying everything I had been taught to believe. I walked down the hallway, determined to finally take control of my life. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let anyone else decide it for me. I walked down the hallway, my heart pounding louder with each step. I was no longer the person I used to be, the one who always did what she was told, who always followed the path laid out for her. No, I was someone new now, someone who had made a decision for herself. I could feel the weight of that decision as I approached my father's office, the place where so many of my past choices had been made for me. The door loomed in front of me like a barrier, one I had to pass through to finally break free. My father's voice, stern and commanding, echoed in my head as I raised my hand to knock. This is your future, Lily, he had said. You'll do what's best for the family. You don't get to choose. But now I was choosing. I was about to take control of my life, and that scared me more than anything. I knocked once, the sound hollow in the silence of the hallway. Come in, my father's voice called from within. I pushed the door open, stepping inside. The room was just as I remembered it, sleek, polished, cold. My father sat behind his large desk, the weight of his authority filling the room. He didn't look up at first, his focus fixed on the papers in front of him, but I could feel his eyes on me as I crossed the room to stand in front of him. Lily, he said, his tone clipped, his gaze still not meeting mine. I trust you've thought about what's at stake here. The family, the legacy, the future. You know what you need to do. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the nerves that were threatening to take over. I wasn't sure I had ever been this nervous in my life. But I knew that this was the moment that would define everything. I've thought about it, I said, my voice steady despite the storm swirling inside me. And I've made my decision. My father finally looked up at me, his gaze sharp and unwavering. And what decision is that? He asked, his voice betraying nothing. I looked him in the eye, refusing to back down. I'm marrying Jason, I said, my voice strong. But not for the reasons you think. I'm marrying him because I want to. I'm marrying him because it's my choice, not because you or anyone else told me I had to. My father's expression hardened, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes, disappointment, maybe, or anger, or perhaps both. You're making a mistake, Lily, he said quietly, his voice low but full of tension. This is about more than just you. This is about the family, the legacy. Do you understand what you're throwing away? I felt a sharp pang in my chest. My father's words hit me harder than I expected, but I didn't let them show. I had spent my whole life living in his shadow, following his rules, and now, for the first time, I was making a decision for myself. I understand, I said, my voice unwavering. But this isn't just about the family anymore. It's about my life. I can't keep living in a way that's not true to who I am. I'm choosing Jason, and I'm choosing me. My father stared at me for a long moment, his gaze piercing. I could feel the weight of his scrutiny, the pressure mounting. But I didn't flinch. I couldn't. You're making a fool of yourself, he said, his voice cold. You think you can walk away from this family, from everything we've built, and still have a future? You'll be nothing without us. The words stung, but I held my ground. I'd rather be nothing than live a life that isn't mine, I said, my voice steady. I'm not going to live for you anymore. I'm going to live for me. My father's face twisted with frustration, but I could see the faintest flicker of something else, perhaps regret, perhaps fear. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You're making a grave mistake, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I won't let you throw away everything I've worked for. You'll regret this, Lily. I promise you that. I took a step back, my heart racing. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of him. You're right, I said, my voice firm. Maybe I will regret it, but at least I'll regret it on my own terms. I won't live under your control any longer. My father's eyes narrowed, and I could see the anger in his face. But for the first time, I didn't care. I wasn't going to let him dictate my life anymore. If you walk out of this room, you're no longer my daughter, he said, his voice cold, final. You'll be nothing to me. My heart twisted at his words, but I didn't let them break me. Maybe that's what I need, I said, my voice steady. Maybe I need to be nothing to you to finally become who I'm meant to be. I turned and walked toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. As I opened the door, I felt the weight of my father's gaze on my back, but I didn't look back. I was done being controlled. I was done living in fear. I was choosing my own path, no matter what it cost me. I stepped out of the office and into the hallway, the air feeling fresher, lighter, somehow. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, I felt free. Free to make my own decisions, free to live my own life. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I was finally living for me. I walked out of my father's office, the door closing behind me with a quiet finality. My heart was still racing, but something inside me felt different. I had stood up for myself. For the first time in my life, I had chosen my own path, no matter what it meant. I wasn't sure what would come next, but I was done letting fear and obligation control me. As I walked down the hallway, I could feel my mind spinning. My father's threats, his anger, they still lingered in my mind, but they didn't have the same power over me anymore. I had made a decision, and no matter what happened, I would follow through. I reached Jason's room, and for a moment, I hesitated. What would he think of all this? What would he think of the choice I had just made? I had told him that I wanted to marry him, that I was choosing him, but I knew this wasn't just about him. It was about me, too. I had to be true to myself, even if it meant facing the consequences of defying my family. I knocked on the door softly, my hand trembling slightly. Come in, Jason's voice called out from inside. I pushed the door open and stepped in, meeting his gaze. He was sitting up in bed, looking more awake and alert than he had in days. A small smile tugged at his lips when he saw me, but I could see the concern in his eyes. "Lily, what happened?" he asked, his voice full of tenderness. I walked over to the bed and sat down next to him, taking a deep breath. "I stood up to my father," I said quietly. "I told him that I'm marrying you. But not because I'm being forced into it. I'm marrying you because it's my choice. I'm choosing my own life now." Jason's eyes softened, and he reached for my hand, his grip warm and steady. "Lily, you don't know how much that means to me," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I don't want you to feel like you're trapped in this marriage because of me. You should never have to feel that way. I want you to make the decision because it's what you truly want." I looked at him, my chest tightening with emotion. He understood. He didn't want me to marry him out of obligation, out of some misguided sense of duty. He wanted me to choose him, to choose us, because that was what I truly wanted. And for the first time, I believed I could. "I don't know what will happen next," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't know if my father will accept it, if he'll ever forgive me. I don't know if I'll lose everything I've ever known. But I'm ready to face whatever comes. Because this is my life, Jason, and I want to live it for me." Jason squeezed my hand, his eyes shining with pride and understanding. "You are so much stronger than you give yourself credit for," he said quietly. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. I'm with you, Lily. You don't have to go through this alone." His words were a comfort, a promise that I wasn't making this decision in isolation. For the first time in so long, I felt like I had someone on my side, someone who truly understood me, someone who cared for me as I was, not as I was expected to be. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me." Jason smiled, and the warmth in his gaze made my heart ache. "You don't need to thank me, Lily. I believe in you, and I always will." We sat in silence for a while, the quiet comfort of his presence soothing my racing thoughts. I didn't know what the future held, what my family would do, what my father's reaction would be, or what kind of challenges we'd face together. But for the first time, I felt like I was walking towards something real, something that belonged to me. I wasn't just following the path laid out for me. I was choosing my own path, and that made all the difference. Finally, I broke the silence, standing up from the bed. "I need to go back to my father," I said, my voice firm. "I need to tell him that I'm not backing down. I'm marrying you, Jason, and nothing is going to change that." Jason nodded, a proud smile on his face. "I'm with you, Lily. Whatever happens, we'll get through it together." I walked out of his room, my heart filled with a newfound sense of strength. I had no idea how my father would respond, what consequences I would face for going against everything he had planned for me. But I knew one thing. I was finally living my life for myself. I didn't have all the answers, and the future was still uncertain. But for the first time, I was ready to face whatever came my way. I walked down the hallway, toward the elevator, feeling a sense of determination that I had never felt before. I was no longer the person who let fear and obligation control her. I was someone who had made a choice for myself, and I was ready to stand by it, no matter what. I stood in front of my father's office, my heart racing in my chest. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing on me, the final step of my decision hanging in the air. I had chosen my own path, but now I had to face the consequences. My hand hovered over the door handle, and I could almost hear the voice in my head telling me to turn back, to reconsider. But there was no turning back. I had already made my decision, and this was where it would lead me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and opened the door. My father was sitting at his desk, his face impassive as always, though I could feel the tension in the room. He didn't look up as I entered, as if he expected me. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, he spoke, his voice cool and controlled. "I knew you'd come back, Lily. I knew you couldn't resist the pressure." His words cut through me, but I stood my ground. "I didn't come back because of pressure," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "I came back because I'm making my own choice now. I'm marrying Jason, and nothing's going to change that." My father's eyes narrowed as he looked up at me. His gaze was sharp, calculating, but for once, I didn't flinch. "You think you're in control here?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Lily. You think Jason is going to save you? You think he'll stand by you when everything falls apart?" I felt my anger flare, but I didn't let it take over. "This isn't about Jason saving me," I said firmly. "This is about me choosing my own life. I'm not going to be a puppet anymore, not for you." Not for anyone. My father stood up from his chair, his face twisted in frustration. You don't know what you're doing. You're throwing away everything. Everything we've built. Our name, our legacy, it's all going to crumble because of this. Do you really think you can just walk away from that? I stood tall, refusing to back down. I don't care about the legacy if it means losing myself in the process. I want to be happy, and I'm going to fight for that. I'm not living for anyone else anymore. For a long moment, my father stared at me, his face unreadable. I could feel the weight of his anger, but also a flicker of something else, something close to regret, maybe. But before I could say anything else, he spoke, his voice quieter but no less intense. I've spent my whole life building this family, Lily. Everything I've done for you. And now you're throwing it all away. His words hit harder than I expected, and I could feel my resolve waver for a moment. But then I remembered why I was doing this. I remembered what Jason had said, about making choices for myself. I wasn't throwing anything away. I was building something new, something that was mine. I'm not throwing anything away, I said, my voice stronger now. I'm starting something new. For me. And if that's something you can't understand, then that's on you, not me. There was a long silence, and for a moment, I thought my father might say something more, but instead, he just looked at me with cold eyes. You've made your choice, Lily, he said finally, his voice bitter. But don't expect me to be there when it all falls apart. Don't come running back to me when you realize you can't handle it. His words stung, but I didn't let them show. I won't need to come back, I said, my voice calm. I'll handle it on my own. I turned to leave, but before I reached the door, my father spoke again. You're making a mistake, Lily, he said, his voice softer now, almost regretful. I just want you to understand that. I paused for a moment, my hand on the door handle. I understand, Dad, I said quietly, not looking back. But this is my mistake to make. I opened the door and walked out, the weight of his words still hanging in the air, but I didn't let them drag me down. I had made my decision, and now, I was ready to face whatever came next. As I walked down the hallway, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. I had faced my father, stood up to him, and told him that I was choosing my own path. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let fear control me anymore. I wasn't going to let anyone else decide my future. I made my way back to Jason's room, my heart still racing, but now filled with a sense of determination. I didn't know how he would react to my conversation with my father, but I knew that I was ready to face whatever came next with him by my side. As I entered the room, Jason looked up, his eyes searching mine. How did it go? He asked, his voice tentative. I smiled, a small but genuine smile, and walked over to him. It went just like I thought it would, I said, my voice steady. But I'm not backing down. I'm marrying you, Jason. And nothing is going to change that. Jason's eyes softened with relief, and he reached out to take my hand. You're incredible, Lily, he said, his voice filled with admiration. I'm proud of you. I sat down beside him, my heart swelling with gratitude. I couldn't have done it without you, I said softly. You gave me the strength to finally choose for myself. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the world still hanging over us, but somehow, it didn't feel so heavy anymore. I had made my choice, and I was ready to live with it. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Jason by my side, I knew I could handle whatever came my way. I walked into the living room of the house, the one I had grown up in, and a sense of unease settled over me. It felt as though the walls themselves were closing in, as if they were a constant reminder of the life I was leaving behind. The same house that had been filled with my father's expectations, my mother's rules, and the quiet pressure that had shaped so much of who I was. But today, everything felt different. Today, I was making a choice that wasn't dictated by anyone else. I could hear voices coming from the kitchen as I approached, and I took a deep breath before stepping through the doorway. My mother was sitting at the table, a cup of tea in her hands, her posture rigid as always. When she saw me, her face softened, but there was something in her eyes, something I had come to recognize as concern, maybe even disappointment. Lily, she said, her voice calm but filled with an undercurrent of tension. I assume you've spoken to your father? I nodded, feeling the weight of the conversation that had just taken place. Yes, I said quietly, and I've made my decision. My mother's expression faltered for a moment, and I could see the flicker of something, regret, frustration, pass across her face. She set the cup down gently, and looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "Lily, I need you to understand," she began, her voice soft but insistent. "This marriage, it's not just about you and Jason. It's about the family. It's about securing everything we've built. You're part of something bigger, something that matters. This isn't just your life to choose." I could feel the old familiar pull, the guilt, the obligation. But this time, it didn't have the same hold on me. "I know it's about the family," I said, my voice steady. "But it's also about me. For once, I'm choosing what's best for me." My mother's eyes softened, but I could see the disappointment in them, too. "You don't understand, Lily," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We've sacrificed so much for this family. Your father has worked so hard to build this legacy, and now you're going to throw it all away? Do you think this is easy for us?" Her words struck a chord deep inside me, but I knew the truth now. I couldn't keep living for them. I couldn't keep sacrificing my happiness for the sake of their plans. "I'm not throwing anything away," I said, my voice firm. "I'm starting something new. For myself. This is my choice, Mom. I want to live my life on my own terms." My mother stood up from the table, her movements tense. She walked over to the window and stared out at the garden, her back to me. "You think this is what you want, but you don't understand the consequences," she said, her voice quieter now, filled with sadness. "If you marry Jason, you're leaving everything behind. Everything we've worked for. You'll be out there, on your own, with nothing." I could feel my heart breaking at the thought of losing her, of losing everything I had known. But I couldn't let that stop me. Not anymore. "I know the consequences," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But I can't keep living like this. I have to make my own choices. I have to build my own future." My mother turned to face me, her expression pained but resolute. "I love you, Lily," she said, her voice breaking. "But I don't know if I can support this. I don't know if I can accept you turning your back on everything we've given you." My chest tightened as the weight of her words hit me. But deep down, I knew this was the only way forward. "I'm sorry, Mom," I whispered. "But this is the right choice for me. And I need you to understand that." There was a long silence between us, and I could see the conflict in her eyes, the love and the disappointment fighting for dominance. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but full of finality. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Lily. I really do." I nodded, a tear slipping down my cheek despite my best efforts to stay strong. I didn't want to hurt her, but I had to follow my heart. "I hope so, too," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I turned to leave, but just before I reached the door, I felt my mother's hand on my arm. I turned back to face her, and for the first time, she pulled me into a tight embrace. "I may not agree with this," she whispered, "but I will always love you. Just remember that." I hugged her back tightly, the weight of everything finally lifting a little. "I love you too," I whispered, feeling the warmth of her embrace and the finality of the moment. With one last look at the house, at the life I was leaving behind, I stepped out into the world, ready to begin my own journey. The future was uncertain, and I didn't know what would come next. But for the first time, I felt like I was in control of my life, and that was enough. As I drove to Jason's place, I couldn't help but smile through the tears. No matter what happened, I was no longer living for anyone but myself. And that was a freedom I hadn't known I needed until now. I sat in the car, the engine running but my mind miles away. The drive to Jason's place was supposed to be a simple, routine task, but everything about it felt monumental. My heart raced as I replayed the conversation with my mother, the words still heavy in my chest. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Lily." Her words, though filled with love, felt like a final goodbye. I wasn't sure what I expected from my mother, but it wasn't this sense of quiet acceptance mixed with unresolved tension. She had always been the one to guide me, to shape my decisions, but today, for the first time, I had chosen for myself. I had chosen Jason. I had chosen a life that felt like mine, not the one that had been planned out for me since birth. And yet, in choosing, I had also lost something, my connection to everything I had known. The road stretched ahead of me, long and uncertain, and I felt the weight of that uncertainty press on me. The decision was made, but the consequences? They hadn't fully hit me yet. I parked in front of Jason's building and sat there for a moment, taking a deep breath. I wasn't sure how he would react to everything that had happened, to the tension between me and my family, to my defiance. But there was something in me now, a new strength, a a resolve. I wasn't walking into this relationship out of obligation. I was walking in because it was what I wanted. I wasn't just standing by Jason because it was expected of me. I was choosing him because, for the first time, I saw the possibility of something real, something that could be mine. I stepped out of the car and walked up to his apartment. The hallway felt unfamiliar now, though I had walked down it countless times before. It was strange. Every step I took felt like I was moving towards something new, leaving something old behind. I reached his door and knocked. It was a soft knock, tentative, but the moment the door opened, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Jason was standing there, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Lily," he said, his voice warm, and for a moment, all the tension melted away. He stepped aside, and I walked in, immediately feeling a sense of comfort that I hadn't realized I needed. The apartment felt like a sanctuary, calm, simple, nothing like the world I had just left behind. Jason closed the door and turned to face me. "How did it go?" he asked, his eyes full of concern. I could see that he was waiting for an answer, but I wasn't sure how to put everything I had just experienced into words. "It went the way I thought it would," I said, my voice steady, though I could still feel the weight of the conversation with my father. "But I told him I'm marrying you. That it's my choice." Jason stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. "And what did he say?" His voice was soft, but the concern was clear. "He didn't take it well," I said with a sigh. "He never does. But I'm done with letting him control my life." Jason's face softened, and he reached out to take my hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I'm proud of you, Lily," he said quietly. "I know it's not easy, but you did it. You stood up for yourself. And that's not something everyone can do." His words, though simple, meant more to me than I could explain. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected to feel like I had the strength to face everything, to defy the family that had controlled so much of my life. But here I was, standing in front of Jason, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I felt like I could finally be who I was supposed to be. I didn't know I could do it either, I admitted, my voice shaking slightly. But I'm glad I did. I'm glad I'm finally making my own decisions. Jason smiled, his eyes warm and full of understanding. "You don't have to do it all alone, Lily. I'm here, and I'll always be here." Those words, that simple promise, filled me with a sense of peace I hadn't known I needed. I wasn't alone in this. I didn't have to carry the weight of everything by myself anymore. Jason was here, by my side, and together, we could face whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid of my father's anger, of the consequences, of the unknown. I was ready to live my life for me. "I'm not sure what happens next," I said, looking up at him. "But I know I'm ready to find out. I'm ready to see where this leads." Jason nodded, his eyes filled with a quiet certainty. "We'll figure it out, Lily. Together." As I looked at him, something inside me settled. I had no idea what the future would bring. The road ahead was still unclear, but I wasn't walking it alone. And that, for now, was enough. I smiled at Jason, feeling a sense of relief flood through me. This was it. This was my life, and for the first time in a long time, I was choosing to live it on my own terms. Whatever came next, I was ready. I sat in the quiet of Jason's apartment, the stillness pressing in around me. It felt like a strange kind of peace, the kind that comes after you make a decision you've been avoiding for so long. Jason was sitting across from me, his eyes never leaving mine, and for the first time in a long while, I could see the weight of everything that had been building between us, the unspoken words, the fear of what would come next, finally starting to lift. The decision had been made. I had chosen my own path, and no matter what, I was going to follow it. "I can't believe we're here," I said, my voice soft, almost like I was still trying to convince myself that I had truly made the choice. Jason gave me a small, knowing smile. "I can. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for," he said, his voice filled with a quiet admiration. The sincerity in his words made something shift inside me, like a door I hadn't realized was locked had finally opened. For so long, I had lived for everyone else, letting their desires, their expectations, dictate my every move. But now, I had finally taken control. It was liberating, but it was also terrifying. "I've spent my whole life doing what I was told," I said, shaking my head slightly as I spoke, living by their rules, trying to fit into the life they've mapped out for me. And now, everything feels different. It's like I'm walking into the unknown. Jason nodded, understanding. You are. And that's okay, he said. I'm here, and I'll be with you through all of it. No matter what happens next, we'll figure it out together. His words, as simple as they were, gave me more courage than I thought possible. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. Jason wasn't just some bystander to my story. He was a partner, a person who saw me, truly saw me, and wanted to stand beside me, not because he had to, but because he chose to. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I don't know what my family is going to do, I said, my voice quieter now. My father, he's not going to let this go easily. He's always been in control, always made the decisions for me. And now, I've defied him. I'm afraid of what he might do. Jason's gaze softened, and he reached across the table, his hand finding mine. I know it's not going to be easy, he said gently. But this is your life, Lily. You've made the choice, and that's what matters. Whatever your father does, whatever anyone does, it doesn't change the fact that you're free now. You've chosen to live for yourself. That's a victory in itself. I squeezed his hand, feeling a surge of gratitude and love for him. The path ahead might be full of challenges, and I couldn't predict how my family would react. But right now, with Jason by my side, I felt like I had the strength to face anything. I'm so scared, I admitted, my voice trembling for a moment. Scared of losing my family, scared of losing everything I've ever known. But at the same time, I can't keep living the way I was. I can't keep living in fear of disappointing everyone. I want to be free. Jason's eyes softened even more, and he gave me a reassuring smile. You already are, Lily, he said quietly. You're free because you made that choice. No matter what happens next, no one can take that away from you. I nodded, the words sinking in deep. For the first time in my life, I was finally free. Free from the pressure, free from the expectations. I was finally living for myself, and that was a kind of freedom I had never known. It didn't mean it was going to be easy. It didn't mean there wouldn't be pain along the way, or that everything would magically fall into place. But it meant that I was no longer bound by the chains of other people's desires. I was in control of my own life. We sat in silence for a while, just holding hands, the weight of our words hanging in the air between us. I didn't know what would happen next, and I couldn't predict the future. But for the first time, I felt like I had a say in what came next. Jason stood up after a moment, pulling me into his arms. Come on, he said, his voice low and full of affection. Let's not waste another second. Let's go out and enjoy today. No more waiting for permission. Let's just live, Lily. His words felt like the start of something new, a new chapter. And as he held me in his arms, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. No matter what happened in the future, I knew that this moment, right here, was mine. The life ahead of me was mine to create, and with Jason by my side, I knew I was capable of anything. We left the apartment together, stepping out into the world. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I was ready to live my life on my terms. And nothing, not even my family's expectations, could take that away from me. I walked down the busy streets, the noise of the city blending into the background as I tried to clear my mind. Jason was by my side, his presence comforting, but the weight of everything that had happened still pressed on me. I had made the choice to live my life on my terms, but there was a part of me that still wondered if it was the right decision. My family had always been there, had always been the force that shaped my world, and now I had chosen to step away from that. I had chosen Jason. The thought of facing them again, of seeing their disappointment and anger, still haunted me. But with Jason beside me, I felt stronger than I ever had before. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in my life, I was the one deciding what came next. We reached a quiet park, and Jason led me to a bench. I sat down beside him, the cool evening air brushing against my face. We didn't speak at first, just sat in comfortable silence, letting the moment wash over us. I'm proud of you, Lily, Jason said after a while, breaking the silence. I turned to look at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. You're the first person who's ever said that, I said, my voice quiet. My whole life, I've been told what to do, how to live, what was expected of me. And now, I don't even know what's next. Jason smiled at me, a reassuring look in his eyes. What's next is whatever you want it to be, he said. You're free, Lily. You've always had the power to make your own decisions. It just took you a while to see that. His words were like a balm to my soul, and I felt a weight lift off my chest. For so long, I had been shackled by the expectations of my family, by the pressures that came with their legacy. But now, as I sat there with Jason, I realized that I was no longer bound by those chains. I was free to choose my own future, to decide what I wanted, not what I was told to want. It's just scary, I admitted, my voice small. I've spent so many years living for everyone else. Now that I'm finally living for myself, I don't know what that even looks like. Jason reached over and took my hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. You'll figure it out, he said softly. It's not going to be easy, but you don't have to do it alone. You've got me, and I'll be here every step of the way. I looked at him, feeling a warmth spread through me. He wasn't just saying those words. I could see it in his eyes. He meant it. And for the first time, I believed him. I wasn't alone in this. Whatever came next, Jason was there. Thank you, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I don't know what I would do without you. He smiled, his gaze filled with understanding. You don't have to worry about that, he said. You're never alone. Not while I'm here. We sat there for a while longer, the city moving around us. But for those few moments, it felt like time stood still. I didn't have to worry about my family's judgment or my father's anger. I didn't have to worry about what the future might bring. I just had to focus on the present, on the choice I had made, and the life I was going to build with Jason. As the sun set, casting a warm golden light over everything, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I wasn't sure what the future held. There were still questions, still fears, but there was also hope. Hope for a new beginning. Hope for a life I could truly call my own. We'll make it work, I said, more to myself than to Jason. No matter what happens, we'll make it work. Jason nodded, his smile widening. I know we will, he said. You've got me, and I've got you. That's all we need. I leaned into him, letting myself relax for the first time in weeks. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, there would be obstacles, but as long as we were together, I felt like we could face anything. The future wasn't set in stone, but I finally felt like I was in control of it. And with Jason by my side, I was ready to walk down that uncertain path, knowing that whatever happened, we would face it together. I wasn't just following the path laid out for me anymore. I was creating my own path, and that made all the difference. As we sat there, the world around us felt smaller, more manageable. There was peace in the choice I had made. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I woke up early the next morning, the soft light of the sunrise creeping through the curtains. I lay there for a moment, still, taking it all in. The decision I had made, the steps I had taken to finally take control of my life, it was all beginning to feel real. There was a sense of freedom now, something I hadn't felt before. For so long, I had been caught in the web of family expectations, trying to live up to ideals that were never truly mine. But today, I wasn't living for anyone else. I was living for me. The thought brought a smile to my face. I looked over at Jason, still asleep beside me. His peaceful expression made my heart swell. He had stood by me through everything, never asking for anything in return. And now, as I lay there beside him, I realized that this was the future I had chosen. It wasn't going to be perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was mine, and that was enough. I quietly slipped out of bed and made my way to the kitchen. I could hear the soft hum of the city outside, but in here, it was peaceful. The kitchen was still unfamiliar to me. This wasn't my home, not yet. But in that moment, it felt like a new beginning, a place where I could make my own decisions, create my own space. As I brewed coffee, I thought about what was coming next. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. My family's disapproval would follow me, and there would always be challenges. But I wasn't alone anymore. Jason and I had built something together, and no matter what happened, we would face it as a team. The sound of footsteps behind me brought me back to the present. I turned to find Jason standing in the doorway, his hair tousled, a sleepy smile on his face. "Morning," he said softly, his voice still thick with sleep. "How's the coffee?" I handed him a mug, smiling back. "It's good," I said. "It's going to be a new day." Jason took the mug from me, his eyes soft as he looked at me. "You're really doing it, aren't you?" he said quietly. I nodded. "I'm not looking back anymore, Jason. I'm ready to build my life, not just follow the one they set for me." He stepped closer, his hand gently brushing against mine. "I'm proud of you, Lily. You're more than capable of this. You've already made the hardest choice. His words meant more to me than I could express. Jason had never once made me feel like I wasn't enough. Even when I was unsure, he was my rock. And that gave me the confidence to keep going. I realized in that moment that we weren't just moving forward together out of love. We were partners. We were each other's support system. Whatever obstacles we faced, we would face them together. And that was the most comforting thought of all. The days after that were a blur of emotions. There were still moments of uncertainty, moments when the weight of what I had left behind threatened to pull me back. But every time I thought about stepping back into the life I had known, I thought about Jason. I thought about the life we could create together, one that was free from expectations, one that was built on mutual respect, love, and the choices we made for ourselves. I didn't have to live for anyone else anymore. I had built a future based on what I wanted, not what others expected. My family's disappointment was still there, hanging over me like a shadow, but it no longer had the power to control my actions. They would have to accept that I was no longer the person they could push around. My life was mine now. Jason and I decided to move forward with our wedding, but this time, it was on our terms. We didn't follow any of the traditional paths my family had envisioned. We planned something small, something personal, and for the first time, I felt a sense of excitement for what the future held. The day of the wedding arrived, and as I stood in front of the mirror, looking at myself in my dress, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't the grand wedding my family had hoped for, but it was perfect for us. The love between Jason and I wasn't about the ceremony or the expectations. It was about the life we would build together. The ceremony was simple, but the vows we exchanged held more meaning than any lavish event could ever hold. "I promise to choose you every day," Jason said, his voice steady, his eyes filled with love. "Not because I have to, but because I want to. Always." The words were simple, but they echoed through my soul. I had chosen him, and he had chosen me. That was all that mattered. We sealed our vows with a kiss, and in that moment, I realized that this was what I had been searching for. Not a perfect life, not a perfect future, but a life that was truly mine. A life where I was free to make my own choices, to love without fear, to live for myself and for the man who had stood by my side. As we left the ceremony, hand in hand, I looked at Jason, my heart swelling with love. This was just the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but as long as we were together, I knew we could face anything. This was the life I had chosen. This was the life I had fought for. And no matter what came next, I was ready to face it. Because I had finally found my own path, and with Jason by my side, I knew I was never walking it alone. In this compelling narrative, we dive into a tale that mirrors the themes of wealth, power, and personal choice, reminiscent of many captivating millionaire stories. The journey of the protagonist is not just about love or financial success, but about breaking free from the constraints imposed by family and tradition. As the story unfolds, we see a young woman, caught between her family's legacy and her own desires, making the courageous decision to forge her own path. The tension builds as she confronts the life she was meant to live, struggling to reconcile her dreams with the expectations placed upon her. Along the way, she meets Jason, who represents the possibility of a life unshackled by wealth and status. Together, they navigate the complexities of love, choice, and independence. The story unfolds against a backdrop of millionaires and the pressures that come with such a life, highlighting the internal conflict of choosing between personal happiness and family loyalty. As the narrative progresses, we witness the protagonist's transformation as she steps into a new chapter, finally realizing that true happiness lies in living for herself. This story not only mirrors the essence of many classic millionaire stories, but also explores themes of self-determination, freedom, and love. In the end, the protagonist's journey is a powerful reminder that sometimes, stepping away from everything you know is the only way to truly find what you've been searching for. If you've ever been fascinated by millionaire stories, this tale will resonate with you, showing that true wealth isn't measured by money, but by the courage to live life on your own terms.